Today I'm leaving Tbilisi and crossing into Armenia, bound for Yerevan, with my driver, Khari. There'll be wide open spaces, post-Soviet wastelands and UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So join us on a spectacular journey all the way to Yerevan. We leave the Georgian capital at first light and head south. You never know what you might see by the roadside here, like an old caravanserai in the middle of a lorry park. The region south of Tbilisi, where Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan meet, still has a mixture of ethnic groups despite the international boundaries that sprung up in the early 1990s. For example, from the town of Shaumiani to the Armenian border, the population is mainly Azeri Muslim. We see many gates decorated with red, signifying that in that household there is a young woman looking to marry. 76 kilometres south of Tbilisi, we arrive at the border crossing at Bagratashen. Due to hostile political relations, Armenia's land borders with Azerbaijan and Turkey are currently closed, leaving just a few crossing points with Georgia to the north and Iran to the south. Well, I'm through Georgian passport control and I now need to find Harry in the duty-free. I get the feeling that this duty-free store is extremely profitable. Now it's time to negotiate Armenian passport control. Welcome to Armenia. The border here is formed by the Debed River. Heading into the Armenian province of Lori, we immediately follow the river valley south. The valley then steadily develops into a canyon. And we soon turn off the highway and climb up to the plateau to visit one of Armenia's most spectacular historic sites, the UNESCO-listed Haghpat Monastery. Now, pilgrims back in the day kept it simple when it came to distinguishing between the various monasteries of the region. Haghpat simply means huge wall. I told you they kept it simple. UNESCO considered the monastery to be of outstanding universal value and an exceptional example of the ecclesiastical architecture that developed in Armenia in the 10th to 13th centuries. Unique by virtue of its blending of elements of both Byzantine church architecture and the traditional vernacular building style of this region. The monastery was founded in 976 AD by King Ashot the Merciful and his wife, Queen Khosrovanush, and over the centuries has withstood both enemy attack from invading armies and numerous earthquakes. The main cathedral part of the complex is over 1,000 years old. There's been a little bit of restoration, but on the whole, it's still almost entirely authentic. Dropping down into the gorge again, we make a short stop at Sanahin Bridge. The bridge feels neglected now, but when it was built in the year 1192, it marked the high point of medieval Armenian engineering. In fact, it was still in daily use well into the 20th century. The bridge now lies within the industrial town of Alaverdi. This was a huge copper smelting town in Soviet times. Although apparently the mine is still open, most of Alaverdi's industry looks to be totally derelict. There was a cable car linking the higher part of the town with the lower part, but that has been out of action for years. It's a town that seems in desperate need of investment. As we continue along the gorge, signs on either side of the road indicate a multitude of churches and monasteries on the higher slopes. You would need weeks to visit them all, especially as some of them have no road access. Further on, the road abruptly climbs the gorge in a series of hairpin bends to reach the plateau where we enter Vanadzor. This was also a major industrial centre during Soviet times, especially for the production of chemicals. The derelict shells of those huge factories now spread out to the west of the town. For decades, Armenia used industrial cities away from Yerevan as the machine for economic growth. The Soviets poured enormous resources into the construction of massive factories and sent engineers from other republics to ensure active development and productivity. The Soviet ideal was to create factories that would supply its own mass market. But out of that system, the Armenian industrial plants have become skeleton-like burdens. In pre-Soviet times, the town was known as Tbilisi. Then, following the Soviet occupation, it was changed to Kirovakan after the Bolshevik leader Sergei Kirovakan. Upon independence, it became Vanadzor, meaning Valley of the Monastery. The market here, or shuka, spills across many streets and is the largest in the Lori region. As well as 3 name changes, Vanadzor has suffered massive economic collapse, an enormous earthquake, and every year endures an extremely bitter winter. The people of this city are very resilient. It's lunchtime and Harry has recommended a food court out on the highway west of town. I think it's fair to say that the food served here now is far healthier and tastier than the food that was available to the Soviet workers who used to work in the neighbouring factories. A few kilometres west of Vanadzor we come to the town of Spitak. At 11:41 on the 7th of December 1988, Spitak was at the epicentre of a devastating earthquake. Every single building in the town was destroyed. Even the newspaper Pravda admitted that this was due to the poor quality of construction during the Brezhnev era. The effect of the earthquake was catastrophic. It's estimated that around 50,000 people died and over 100,000 were injured. The buildings that you see in Spitak now were all built from the 1990s onwards, many with aid from international agencies and companies. At the heart of the new town square is an enormous wall sculpture to spiritual Armenian identity, with pomegranates and blossoming crosses. You can walk up to the earthquake memorial above the town, but from reports that I've read, the path is overgrown and the Soviet monument is already crumbling. The landscape south of Spitak is forbidding. The highway traverses a high plateau and there is not a tree in sight. The landscape is dominated by Aragat's mountain, at 4,090 metres above sea level, the highest in Armenia. Legend tells us that Gregory the Illuminator, who introduced Christianity to Armenia in the 4th century, prayed on the peak of the mountain. Numbering around 30,000, Yazidis are Armenia's largest ethnic minority, and we pass some of their villages high on the plateau. Near the village of Artashevan, the highway passes a collection of sculptures known affectionately as Alphabet Alley. It was founded in 2005 on the 1600th anniversary of the invention of the Armenian alphabet, and features sculptures of the 39 letters of the alphabet and Mesrop Mashtots, the inventor. Mashtots was a linguist and a theologian of the 1st century. Historians believe that without the language and alphabet to cling onto, then Armenian identity might well have been lost over centuries of persecution. It's no wonder that Mashtots is venerated in Armenia as a saint. You know, a sculpture park for the Roman alphabet wouldn't really work, but the Armenian alphabet, just like the Georgian alphabet, is such a work of art. It only seems natural. As we continue south, Mount Ararat is clearly visible on the horizon. As important to Armenians as the alphabet, the mountain lies across the closed border in Turkey. Until 1918, it was in the region known as Western Armenia, until the Ottoman Turks embarked on ethnic cleansing and genocide. No Armenians live there now, but the mountain is still part of the national psyche. Before long, the suburbs of Yerevan appear. The Armenian capital is home to over 1/3 of the country's total population of 2.9 million. It's not hard to see why, after travelling through some of the provincial towns where the factory closures have left the agricultural sector as the main part of the economy. This is Armenia's city of opportunity. The brutalist communist blocks on the outskirts aren't the best first impression, but Yerevan's attractions lie in its centre, along the blocks and buildings laid out by Alexander Tamanian, such as Revolution Square. Then known as Lenin Square, it was regarded as one of the finest squares in the whole of the Soviet Union. I love visiting Yerevan, and in a separate film I'll be setting out my top 10 highlights. But for now, my thanks to Carrie for today's drive, and I'll see you on the next journey.